The fluorescent lights of Logan International Airport cast harsh shadows across Officer James Thompson's face as he maintains his vigilant watch at Terminal B, checking his watch to mark hour 6 of his 12-hour shift. The seasoned officer adjusts his collar against the perpetual chill of the airport's aggressive air conditioning system while scanning the endless stream of travelers rushing past his post near the security checkpoint. The morning has been relatively quiet, with only a few minor incidents involving forgotten laptops and oversized shampoo bottles, but something about this particular Tuesday morning feels different to Officer Thompson, whose instincts have been honed by 20 years on the force. The constant hum of rolling suitcases and hurried footsteps creates a familiar white noise that allows him to focus on behavioral patterns among the crowd, spotting the subtle signs that experience has taught him to notice when something about the usual airport chaos suddenly catches his trained eye. A young black girl, perhaps 13, wearing a navy blue hoodie and worn jeans, moving with an odd mixture of purpose and hesitation, her small purple backpack clutched tightly against her chest, while her eyes dart between the departure boards and security checkpoints in a way that triggers his extensive behavioral detection training. The girl stands out not just because she's alone, but because of the way she carries herself, shoulders tight with tension as she pretends to study her phone while actually watching the TSA agents at their posts. Officer Thompson notices how she shifts her weight from foot to foot in a way that suggests nervous energy rather than typical teenage restlessness. Her worn sneakers leaving subtle scuff marks on the polished floor as she paces in a small circle near the airport directory, checking over her shoulder every few minutes as if expecting someone to approach her. The seasoned officer begins mentally reviewing protocol for unaccompanied minors while observing how the girl's free hand keeps touching the front pocket of her backpack, a behavior that could indicate anything from a hidden candy bar to something more serious. In his experience, the morning crowd flows around her like water around a rock, some travelers casting curious glances at the young girl standing alone, while others remain absorbed in their own journeys, completely unaware of the subtle drama unfolding in their midst. Officer Thompson shifts his position slightly, moving to get a better view of the girl while maintaining a professional distance, his right hand unconsciously adjusting his badge as he considers the best approach to this situation. The light from the massive terminal windows creates a strange halo effect around the girl's silhouette as she moves toward the domestic departures board, again, her movements catching that delicate balance between trying to blend in and unknowingly drawing attention to herself. Through the very effort to appear casual, something about her profile sends an unexpected shiver of recognition through Officer Thompson, a sensation he quickly dismisses as impossible given the hundreds of faces he sees every day. Yet the feeling lingers as he watches her check her phone again, this time fumbling slightly as she nearly drops it, her hands trembling in a way visible even from his position several yards away. Time seems to slow as Officer Thompson begins his approach, marking every step with practiced precision, his boots making soft squeaking sounds against the freshly waxed terminal floor. Standard protocol for unaccompanied minors echoes in his mind like a well-rehearsed mantra. Approach with non-threatening body language, maintain clear line of sight, keep voice calm and steady, establish verbal contact before physical proximity. The morning light streaming through the massive airport windows casts long shadows across the terminal floor as he moves closer to the girl. Something about her delicate profile sends another wave of that strange, inexplicable recognition through him, a feeling he forces himself to push aside, focusing instead on his professional duties. Yet the sensation lingers like a forgotten dream, hovering just beyond his conscious reach. The girl suddenly looks up from her phone, her dark eyes meeting his for a fraction of a second before registering his blue uniform and gleaming badge. In that moment, her expression transforms from nervous anticipation to raw fear, her shoulders tensing like a startled deer before flight. The next few seconds unfold in chaotic slow motion as she turns and bolts through the crowded terminal, her purple backpack bouncing against her spine while she weaves between startled travelers. Her sudden movement sends a display of travel neck pillows cascading to the floor, creating a soft avalanche of memory foam and microfiber that forces other passengers to stumble and dodge the falling merchandise. Nearby, a group of businessmen in pressed suits step back in surprise, their coffee cups tilting precariously, while a mother quickly pulls her toddler out of the girl's path. The scene erupts into immediate chaos as passengers instinctively reach for their phones, screens lighting up like fireflies in the terminal brightness. Urgent voices rise above the airport's usual drone, some shouting questions, others recording the unfolding drama, while still others call out in protest at the sight of a uniformed officer pursuing a young black girl. Officer Thompson maintains his professional focus even as he registers the growing hostile energy of the crowd, his training kicking in as he calculates the safest way to intercept the girl without causing further panic. or putting other travelers at risk. His longer stride and knowledge of terminal layout allow him to anticipate her path, cutting through a shortcut past the currency exchange booth while keeping her in sight. Her navy hoodie a beacon among the business suits and vacation wear of regular travelers, she approaches gate B17, her breath coming in desperate gasps now as she tries to squeeze past a confused family of four, their matching Hawaiian shirts and lei necklaces suggesting the start of a vacation about to be interrupted by airport drama. Officer Thompson sees his opening and moves swiftly but carefully, his hand closing around her arm with firm but measured pressure, exactly as trained to prevent escape without causing harm. He feels her whole body trembling beneath his grip, while nearby passengers press closer, phones raised high to capture every moment of the confrontation. The air grows thick with tension as more travelers stop to witness the scene, their murmured concerns and outright protests creating a rising tide of disapproval that threatens to overwhelm the usual airport white noise. Officer Thompson keeps his voice steady and professional as he begins the standard detention script, but something about the girl's scent as she turns toward him, a mixture of strawberry shampoo and something hauntingly familiar, makes his heart skip a peculiar beat. The private security office feels smaller than usual, its beige walls closing in with each passing minute as Sarah sits across from Officer Thompson in a standard issue metal chair, her shoulders tight with defiance while she refuses to meet his gaze, the room's flickering fluorescent light casting strange shadows across her young face, making her appear somehow older and younger at the same time. The only sound comes from the gentle hum of the ancient heating system and the occasional crackle of his radio, creating an unsettling backdrop to their silent standoff. Through the frosted glass window, Officer Thompson can make out the shapes of gathering crowds, their muffled voices growing louder with each passing moment as video of the incident begins spreading across social media platforms like wildfire. The girl, who only identifies herself as Sarah, keeps her eyes fixed on a small coffee stain on the gray carpet, her fingers absently tracing the worn edges of her purple backpack, which now sits sealed in an evidence bag on the metal table between them. Required protocol for any detained passenger. Officer Thompson notices how her right foot taps a steady rhythm against the chair leg, a gesture that triggers something in his memory, but remains frustratingly out of reach. His attempts at standard questioning meet a wall of silence broken only by her quiet insistence that she needs to find someone important, the vagueness of her answers forcing him to continue the detention. While she provides no last name, no contact information, no explanation for her presence at the airport beyond those cryptic words outside the office door, voices grow increasingly agitated as airport staff struggle to manage the growing crowd of concerned onlookers and self-appointed civilian rights monitors. Officer Thompson can hear fragments of their angry discussions through the thin walls, words like profiling and harassment mixing with demands for supervisor intervention. The pressure to resolve the situation mounts with each passing second, while something about the girl's profile view continues to tug at his deepest memories. Her chin, held high in stubborn determination, reminds him of someone, but the connection dances just beyond his grasp. The room temperature seems to drop several degrees as Sarah shifts in her chair, the movement causing her hoodie to slide slightly, revealing a glimpse of a silver necklace chain that disappears beneath her collar. Officer Thompson finds his eyes drawn to it, his heart rate inexplicably increasing, though he can't explain why even to himself. The standard issue clock on the wall ticks away precious minutes as he tries different approaches to get her to open up, asking about school, sports, family, anything that might help establish her identity and purpose. But Sarah remains resolute in her silence. Her responses, when they come at all, are clipped and careful, as if each word costs for something precious to speak. The growing tension in the room is punctuated by the sudden buzz of Officer Thompson's phone on the metal desk, likely another message from his supervisor demanding an update on the situation that has now gone viral on multiple social platforms. Sarah flinches at the sound, her composure cracking just slightly enough to reveal a flash of fear that makes her seem much younger than her apparent 13 years. The sight stirs something protective in Officer Thompson. Even as his professional training demands he maintain emotional distance from the situation, the air in the small office grows thicker with unspoken words and mounting pressure, while outside the voices grow more insistent, demanding answers that seem to slip further away with each passing moment. Recognition hits Officer Thompson like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs in one devastating moment as Sarah turns her head to wipe away an angry tear, revealing the small heart-shaped birthmark behind her left ear, the same mark he used to kiss goodnight 8 years ago. When she was just 5 years old, his hands begin to tremble uncontrollably as he fumbles with his phone, muscle memory guiding his fingers to a hidden album he hasn't opened in years. There she is, his Catherine Sarah Thompson, frozen in time at age 5, her gap-toothed smile beaming at the camera while wearing the same heart-shaped locket he now realizes hangs beneath Sarah's hoodie. The room starts spinning as 8 years of missed birthdays, school plays, and bedtime stories crash down around him, while Sarah finally meets his gaze with eyes that mirror his own exactly as he remembers them from the day his ex-wife Lisa drove away to California with their daughter in the backseat. The silence in the small office grows deafening as recognition dawns on Sarah's face too, her carefully maintained defiance crumbling into something far more complex, a mixture of fear, relief, and years of pent-up emotion. Officer Thompson tries to stand, but his legs won't cooperate. Instead, he grips the edge of the metal table, his knuckles turning white as the full weight of what just happened settles over him. He had detained his own daughter, treated her like a suspect, followed protocol, while his own flesh and blood sat terrified across from him. The room seems to tilt on its axis as memories flood back, the way she used to demand he check under her bed for monsters, how she would only eat green apple lollipops, never read, how she insisted on wearing her police officer costume 3 Halloweens in a row outside the office. The crowd continues to grow, their angry voices now seeming to come from somewhere far away as Officer Thompson struggles to process how his 13-year-old daughter somehow found her way back to him through an airport security incident. His throat feels too tight to speak, but Sarah breaks the silence, her voice small but steady as she whispers the word daddy for the first time in 8 years. The sound shatters something inside him, sending tears streaming down his face as he moves around the table, protocol forgotten, as Sarah launches herself into his arms, her small frame shaking with sobs that match his own, the silver locket bouncing against his chest, the same one he gave her for her 5th birthday, the last present he was able to give her before the divorce. His fellow officers outside the door fall silent as they peer through the frosted glass window, witnessing the unexpected reunion, while Officer Thompson holds his daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair that somehow hasn't changed since she was small. Even as everything else about her has questions raced through his mind. How did she find him? Why now? What made her run? But in this moment, all that matters is the feeling of her heart beating against his chest, proof that this is real, that his little girl has somehow found her way back to him. Sarah pulls back slightly, her face wet with tears as she reaches for her backpack, pulling out a creased envelope filled with every birthday card he had sent over the years, each one marked return to sender, but carefully saved and carried across the country by a daughter who never stopped loving her father, even when distance and circumstance tried to force them apart. 2 years later, the mahogany panels of Courtroom 7A seem to absorb the mounting tension as 15-year-old Sarah, now poised and composed, takes the witness stand, her posture straight but not rigid as she adjusts the collar of her navy blue blazer, the same color as the hoodie she wore that day at the airport, her testimony marking day 3 of the civil rights lawsuit that has divided the nation, not just along racial lines, but between those who see an abuse of power and those who recognize a tragic story of family separation. A gallery packed beyond capacity with journalists, their laptops casting a soft blue glow across intent faces, while social activists from various organizations sit shoulder to shoulder with law enforcement officials who have come to support their colleague. The air conditioning hums softly beneath the weight of collective anticipation as Sarah begins her story, her voice clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the hushed courtroom. She describes how she had saved her babysitting money for 6 months, counting quarters and dollar bills, late at night under her covers, until she had enough for the plane ticket to Boston. Her mother, never suspecting that her daughter was planning such an elaborate scheme to reconnect with the father she had never stopped missing, despite her mother's attempts to keep them apart. The jury leans forward as one when Sarah describes discovering her father's workplace through careful internet searches, how she had studied his social media presence, learning his shift patterns and airport posting, while collecting every scrap of information she could find about the father who had become more myth than memory in her young mind. Her voice catches slightly as she recounts the moment of seeing him in person for the first time in 8 years, how her carefully rehearsed speech dissolved into panic at the sight of his uniform, her feet carrying her away before her mind could process what was happening in the front row. Officer Thompson sits perfectly still in his dress, blues, his jaw clenched tight as he listens to his daughter describe the fear and confusion of those 7 minutes when he was just another authority figure, someone to run from rather than run towards. Sarah continues her testimony, explaining how she had wanted to speak up in the security office, but fear and doubt had sealed her lips, each passing minute an eternity, as she waited for her father to recognize her, wondering if he had forgotten her face entirely as completely as her mother had tried to erase him from their lives. The prosecuting attorney guides her through the events with careful questions designed to highlight the racial aspects of the incident, but Sarah remains steadfast in her insistence that she had chosen to run not because of her father's actions, but because of her own overwhelming emotions at seeing him again. her words painting a picture of a young girl caught between love and fear, anticipation and anxiety, the desperate desire to reunite with her father warring against years of conditioning to keep her distance. The courtroom falls silent as Sarah pulls out the silver heart locket. She still wears the same one visible in the airport security footage, holding it up as physical proof of the connection that survived 8 years of separation. The afternoon sun streaming through the high windows catches the metal, making it gleam like a beacon, while Sarah explains how she had worn it every day since her 5th birthday, a constant reminder of the father she was determined to find again. The courtroom's massive display screen casts an ethereal blue glow across the transfixed faces of the 12 jurors as they watch the security footage frame by frame. The high-definition airport cameras capturing every nuance of the 7-minute encounter that brought father and daughter face to face. After 8 years of separation, the prosecution team advances the video in slow motion, highlighting each moment with clinical precision. Sarah appearing on screen, her small figure moving through the terminal with the hesitant grace of a young deer in unfamiliar territory, her purple backpack clutched close like a shield against the unknown. The footage switches angles, showing Officer Thompson at his post, his routine scan of the crowd, suddenly focusing on his own daughter. Though he doesn't yet know it, the prosecutor uses a laser pointer to draw attention to his body language. The way he straightens his posture, shifts his weight forward, begins his approach, treating his own flesh and blood like a potential security threat. In the defendant's chair, Officer Thompson sits stoically, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth, as he watches himself interact with his daughter like a stranger on the screen. His attorney furiously scribbling notes, preparing to present research on how trauma and separation affect facial recognition patterns, especially in cases of prolonged parental alienation. The video continues, showing Sarah's attempted flight through the terminal, the prosecution freezing the frame at the moment of initial contact between father and daughter, analyzing Officer Thompson's hand position, the angle of restraint, the procedural mechanics of detaining a minor while completely unaware of the profound personal connection that would reveal itself minutes later. Body language experts take the stand one after another, dissecting every movement, every gesture, their testimony painting conflicting pictures of necessary protocol versus excessive force, while Sarah watches from her seat beside her attorney, her fingers unconsciously touching the silver locket that gleams against her navy blazer, the same locket clearly visible in the security footage, a detail that makes several jurors reach up to wipe away tears. The prosecution zooms in on Sarah's face during the detention, the fear evident in her expression as she realizes her carefully planned reunion has spiraled into something entirely different. Her features a perfect blend of her father's determination and her mother's delicate beauty, though Officer Thompson had been blind to it in the moment. The courtroom holds its collective breath as the video reaches the moment of recognition, the instant when Officer Thompson finally sees what he's been missing. Frame by frame, they watch the realization dawn across his face, his professional demeanor crumbling as 8 years of separation dissolve in a single heartbeat, the footage showing how his hands begin to shake as he reaches for his phone to confirm what his heart already knows, while his daughter studies his face from across the table, waiting for her father to find her beneath the years of absence. An expert witness points out the subtle changes in both their postures, the moment when protocol and procedure give way to pure emotion, their body language shifting from officer and suspect to father and daughter in the space of a few precious seconds. The video ends with their embrace, the security cameras cold eye capturing the moment when law enforcement procedure transforms into family reunion, while in the present courtroom, Officer Thompson finally allows a single tear to fall, remembering how it felt to hold his little girl again after believing he had lost her forever. Officer Thompson rises from his seat with measured dignity, his dress blues pressed to perfection, the medals on his chest catching the afternoon light streaming through the high courtroom windows. As he approaches the witness stand to present his testimony, his footsteps echo against the marble floor, each step carrying the weight of 20 years of law enforcement service and 8 years of fatherly regret. Before taking his oath, he allows himself one glance at Sarah sitting in the gallery, her presence both a comfort and ache. As he prepares to explain how he failed to recognize his own child, his voice remains steady as he begins recounting how the years had changed his daughter's appearance, from the gap-toothed 5-year-old who once wore his police cap around the house to the teenager she had become. The transformation as gradual as seasons changing in photographs he never got to see. He describes the daily reality of airport security work, the constant pressure to make split-second decisions while balancing public safety against individual rights, how his training had become second nature, a shield against the emotional toll of dealing with thousands of faces each day. His testimony shifts from professional to personal as he reveals how he had sent birthday cards every every year carefully chosen for their age-appropriate messages only to have them returned unopened, how he had driven past Sarah's old house countless times, hoping to catch a glimpse of her before his ex-wife Lisa moved them across the country without leaving a forwarding address. The jury leans forward as Officer Thompson pulls out his own worn wallet photo of 5-year-old Sarah, explaining how he had studied it so often the edges had become soft and rounded like weathered beach glass. While the real Sarah grew up 1,000 miles away, his voice catches as he describes the moment in the security office when recognition finally struck, how the birthmark behind her ear, the same one he used to kiss goodnight, had been like a key unlocking a door he thought forever sealed. The prosecution attempts to steer the testimony back toward procedure and protocol, but Officer Thompson speaks with the authority of both law enforcement veteran and heartbroken father, explaining how the very training designed to protect people had temporarily blinded him to the most important person in his life. He demonstrates standard detention techniques, showing how each movement, each decision had followed procedure precisely, even as his heart struggled with an inexplicable sense of recognition that his mind couldn't immediately process. Sarah watches her father from her seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. As he describes the moment everything changed, how the world had shifted on its axis when he finally saw through the years of separation to recognize the daughter he had never stopped loving. Officer Thompson continues his testimony, explaining how every holiday, every birthday, every father-daughter dance at the local community center had been marked on his calendar, even though he knew he would spend them alone, holding on to hope that somehow someday his little girl would find her way back to him. The courtroom falls silent as he describes the aftermath of their airport reunion, how they had sat in the security office for hours afterward, neither wanting to break contact, as Sarah showed him the collection of newspaper clippings about his promotions and community service awards that she had secretly collected over the years, proof that she had been watching him too, even when he couldn't see her. The expert testimony phase brings forward a parade of specialists, each adding layers of scientific context to the emotional core of the case. First to take the stand is Dart Elena Martinez, a leading child psychologist with 30 years of experience studying the effects of parental separation, her silver hair gleaming under the courtroom lights, as she explains how prolonged absence can affect facial recognition patterns in both parents and children, especially during crucial developmental years. She points to brain scan studies showing how trauma can literally rewire neural pathways, creating blind spots in recognition even when confronted with familiar faces. The jury scribbles notes furiously as she describes how children like Sarah often develop complex coping mechanisms, their minds building protective walls that can manifest as flight responses even when encountering the very person they seek. Next comes James Wilson, a behavioral scientist specializing in cross-racial identification rates. His presentation fills the courtroom screens with charts and graphs demonstrating how stress and time pressure can affect recognition abilities across all demographic groups, though he notes that Officer Thompson's case presents unique factors given the personal connection that should have theoretically enhanced recognition. The prosecution attempts to challenge his findings, but Wilson stands firm, citing numerous peer-reviewed studies that support his conclusions. Sarah watches intently from her seat as Rahman Ahmad, a leading expert in law enforcement protocols, takes the stand, his testimony dissecting the 7-minute encounter through the lens of standard airport security procedures, his laser pointer dancing across freeze frames of the security footage as he explains how Officer Thompson followed every procedure with textbook precision, even as his subconscious mind struggled with the unexplained familiarity of the subject. The afternoon light fades to evening as Catherine Brooks, a specialist in generational trauma, explains to the transfixed jury how family court decisions can create ripple effects that span decades, her gentle voice carrying across the hushed courtroom as she describes how children of separation often carry silent wounds that influence their behavior in unexpected ways. Officer Thompson sits straighter in his chair as Brooks presents case studies of similar parent-child reunions, explaining how the shock of recognition can sometimes trigger a delayed response, especially in high-stress environments like airports. The prosecution brings forward their own expert, Dr. Marcus Chen, who specializes in implicit bias training, his testimony attempting to frame Officer Thompson's actions within a broader context of systemic issues. But even he must acknowledge under cross-examination that the unique circumstances of this case challenge traditional analytical frameworks. The day concludes with testimony from Rachel Foster, a facial recognition specialist who demonstrates through computer models how aging algorithms predicted Sarah would look at 13. Her presentation showing side-by-side comparisons of 5-year-old Sarah and her teenage self, explaining how normal changes in facial structure during puberty can complicate natural recognition processes, especially when complicated by emotional trauma and extended separation. Social media evidence floods the courtroom from dozens of perspectives, showing different angles of the 7-minute encounter. Some videos capture the fear in Sarah's voice as she calls for help. Others show Officer Thompson's professional restraint and immediate change in demeanor upon recognition. The most compelling clip comes from a nearby coffee shop security camera, showing the moment Officer Thompson realizes Sarah's identity, his knees buckling slightly as he steps back in shock, while Sarah transitions from fear to recognition. Their first hug in 8 years, captured in grainy black and white footage. The prosecution's case takes an unexpected turn as they present Officer Thompson's spotless 20-year record projected onto screens throughout the courtroom. Page after page of commendations and community service awards scroll past, while the jury studies each document with increasing interest. Not a single complaint of racial bias appears in his file. Instead, they find letters of appreciation from minority youth programs, where Officer Thompson volunteered his weekends, teaching safety workshops and mentoring at-risk teens. His supervisor, Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez, takes the stand, describing how Officer Thompson had requested airport duties specifically because it allowed him to work extra hours, sending half his overtime pay to a college fund for the daughter he wasn't sure he'd ever see again. The prosecution shifts strategy, calling character witnesses from the local community, including Marcus Williams, the director of a youth basketball program, who describes how Officer Thompson would sit in his patrol car during breaks watching games at the playground, where he and Sarah used to spend Sunday afternoons. Sarah herself returns to the witness stand, her voice steady but thick with emotion as she reveals the extent of her planning, describing months spent studying her father's social media presence, learning his work schedule through careful observation of his posts about airport safety tips. She explains how she had secretly followed his career through internet searches, printing news articles about his promotions and community service awards, hiding them under her mattress like precious contraband in her mother's house. The jury listens intently as Sarah describes creating a detailed spreadsheet tracking her father's likely movements through the airport based on social media photos, studying terminal layouts online, and calculating the best time to attempt contact. Her voice catches as she admits how fear overtook her careful planning in the moment, how seeing him in uniform brought back memories of watching him leave in his patrol car the last time 8 years ago, memories that sent her running before her mind could process what her heart wanted. Officer Thompson wipes away tears as his daughter describes finding his old police academy graduation photo in her mother's drawer 5 years ago, the discovery that sparked her determination to find him again. The prosecution attempts to redirect focus to procedure and protocol, but Sarah continues her testimony, explaining how she had saved every dollar from babysitting jobs, birthday money, and household chores, calculating exactly how much she would need for a plane ticket and airport food, planning her trip down to the smallest detail, only to have panic overwhelm her at the crucial moment. She reveals a worn notebook filled with newspaper clippings about her father awards ceremony photos and carefully annotated airport terminal maps, showing how thoroughly she had prepared for their reunion, even marking the security cameras she knew would be recording their encounter. Former colleagues take the stand one after another, describing Officer Thompson's unwavering professionalism and dedication to treating every person with respect regardless of race or background, while Sarah listens from her seat, her fingers tracing the outline of the silver locket that had traveled with her across the country, carrying a tiny photo of her father inside. Closing arguments echo through the hushed courtroom as Sarah's attorney weaves together themes of unconscious bias, institutional racism, and the broader implications for law enforcement, while the defense focuses on the human element, a father and daughter torn apart by circumstance, reunited through a painful but ultimately healing confrontation. The jury receives instructions on separating emotional impact from legal liability, while outside the courthouse, protesters from both sides find common ground in calling for updated protocols on handling unaccompanied minors. Part 12. The verdict arrives on a rainy Thursday afternoon, raindrops streaming down the courthouse windows, creating shadows that dance across the anxious faces of the assembled crowd as the jury files in their expressions, carefully neutral. After 48 hours of deliberation, Officer Thompson stands ramrod straight in his dress blues, while Sarah grips her locket so tightly her knuckles turn white. The foreman rises, clearing his throat before announcing their decision, finding Officer Thompson not liable for civil rights violations, but recommending comprehensive policy reforms for handling unaccompanied minors in airports nationwide. The courtroom erupts in a mixture of whispers and sighs, while father and daughter exchange glances of relief, their personal victory tempered by the knowledge that their case has sparked a broader conversation about law enforcement practices. The media surges forward, hungry for statements, but Officer Thompson and Sarah slip away from the chaos, finding refuge in the same small airport coffee shop where they had shared their first real conversation after the incident 2 years ago. They settle into a quiet corner booth, their reflection ghost-like in the rain-streaked windows, while the barista, recognizing them from the news coverage, quietly serves their usual order of hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and chocolate chip cookies. Still warm from the oven, Sarah pulls out a worn envelope from her backpack containing every birthday card her father had sent over the years, the ones her mother had marked return to sender, but that Sarah had secretly retrieved from the mailbox, each one saved and treasured like precious artifacts from a life she had been denied. Officer Thompson reaches into his uniform pocket, producing a carefully preserved collection of father-daughter dance tickets, one for every year they were apart, explaining how he had bought them faithfully, hoping that somehow someday they would share a dance again. His voice grows thick with emotion as he shows Sarah photos of her half-finished bedroom in his house, the one he had kept ready all these years, updating the decorations as she grew older, based on social media glimpses of her changing interests. Outside the coffee shop, the rain begins to ease as father and daughter plan their future, Sarah sharing stories of her life in California, while Officer Thompson listens with 8 years' worth of patience, finally getting to hear about her first bike ride, her middle school graduation, the school plays he had missed but that she had secretly wished he could attend. They discuss her upcoming 16th birthday, making plans for her first driving lesson in his old pickup truck, the same one she used to climb into wearing his oversized police cap. When she was small, the barista discreetly places fresh cups of hot chocolate on their table as they talk about Sarah spending summers in Boston. Officer Thompson promising to help her apply to colleges in the area, while Sarah shows him the schedule she has already created for making up for lost time, including father-daughter movie nights, weekly dinners, and yes, finally attending one of those father-daughter dances together. They stay in the coffee shop until closing time, their conversation flowing as naturally as the years of separation dissolve like sugar in their hot chocolate, their reflection in the window showing not an officer and a suspect but simply a father and daughter finding their way back to each other, one story, one memory, one moment at a time.